All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So it's been quite a while since I've made a video. Part of that is because I got super busy. Part of that is because I got a little tired of the format not being, it feels a little bit stale, feels a little bit solved, to be honest, and a little bit degenerate. I always enjoy the format when blue is the dominant color. I feel like that's usually the sign of a healthy format when it's an older one. My reasoning is that you have longer games, you have interactive games. That usually means that the most insane things are contained by counter magic, and it forces you to play a sort of thoughtful, tempo-based. There's a push and pull between when you should deploy your resources, when you should hold back, when you play defense, when you play offense. I enjoy all that play and counterplay that blue offers, and I feel like the format is pretty busted when blue is just not possible. It's just too slow. I mean, when I say not possible, I mean it's a tier 2 deck, right? You're going to get plenty of wins if you play blue-based decks that are extremely good, but I don't think they're tier 1. I think they're, or even if they're like tier 1, I think there's sort of an S tier if you want to use a video game tiering. There's A, B, C, D, E, whatever, and S, where S is just the supreme. And, so there are blue strategies that are the A tier, but I don't know of any that are S tier. And I do think that's a problem. Having said all that, this is a big part of the problem, this deck and this style of deck. So I've made some small adjustments to the deck since the last time I produced a video. And I'm not exactly clear. Like, it would be somewhat difficult for me to cover the changes because, to be honest, I don't remember the previous list exactly. But I will go over the ones that have changed somewhat recently and just kind of focus on a few points here and there and kind of let you know what all is going on here. So one of the changes is that I'm no longer using Paradise Mantle. Another one is that I'm no longer using Barbarian Ring. Barbarian Ring is it's a great card. It was in there to deal with Narset. When you're playing a blue deck that can lock out your card draw, you can kill the Narset as long as they go down to one counter, which they often do. They'll have one counter on Narset, you have nothing on the board, and they have a counter spell in hand, so they're feeling pretty good. You could Barbarian Ring, kill the Narset, and go on about your merry way. That was the idea for the card, the primary reason it was in here. And of course it had a little bit of synergy with Crucible Worlds, but if you're playing a Barbarian Crucible game, sorry about that, you probably are really in a bad way. I mean, it's nice to keep in mind, but format's just too quick for that. Narset's not hardly anywhere, and is not a total concern for this deck either, because you can go around Narset besides removing it. You can Ad Nauseam, you can Dark Confidant, you can Necros, you can get around the card as well. And overall, it just was cluttering up the mana base because of the number of fetches in here, and because of the fact that there are cards in the format that search for basic lands. We're better off having an extra basic swamp in the deck and just making sure that we have targets for our fetches. We have now got 2 swamps, a basic mountain, and then the 2 dual lands for a total of 5 targets. If you get to the point where you need more than 5 targets, the game has gone much longer than almost any games ever do in the format at this point. So that's where we're at with that. Of course, if that should happen, you also have Urborg to turn your fetches into swamps, essentially, and so you can still get value out of them that way. You can pitch one of them to maybe a Mox Diamond. You can throw them away to Liliana. There's things you can do in here. Always not, like, they're not wasted. You can even throw them into you can just grind them into a Dust Bowl, which I do all the time with fetches. I just don't sack the fetch. I just eat them as is and throw them in a Dust Bowl and kill my opponent's land. So there's plenty of ways to take advantage of fetches that are, quote unquote useless, that have no targets, basically. But with that in mind, we still want to have a little bit extra redundancy on the mana base, just because Path of Exile is a card and so on and so forth. Or Path to Exile, I suppose. Path of Exile is a game. You should check it out if you haven't. Anyway, having said all that, so what else? So Barbarian Ring, less searched for, less useful than Swamp. I also cut Exploration Map, which is another reason to cut the ring, with one less tutor for lands, one card dedicated to tutor for lands. Having a tutorable land target for corner cases makes a lot less sense, because the opportunity now I would need to have Threshold, a reason to use the Barbarian, and a way to go get it that isn't a dedicated card for that purpose. And that's a lot of because remember, when I had the map, I could use Urza's Saga to go get map, and map to go get ring. So there was like a chain of tutors built into the deck that is now gone. And so it's better to just have consistency over flexibility. So map is gone, Barbarian Ring's gone, Paradise Mantle is gone, and I think those are the major changes as far as what's been cut. What's been added, we got a new card called Shieldred's Edict, which is very, very nice. It allows us to kill Planeswalkers, which is always good, and it's instant speed removal for creatures as well. So cheap, easy to cast, just a nice card. Probably a staple that'll end up staying. So it goes along with the Dreadbore, the Angrist Rampage. We now have the those two plus the Shieldred's Edict. We have like 3 different Planeswalker killer cards on 2, which is really good when you're playing against other degenerate decks that put Planeswalkers into play super early in the game. You can possibly get out from under their threat early so that the game can continue, which is nice. Other changes, I would say Ember Shieldbreaker's been in and out of the deck. This one's kind of a flex slot, but I do like the card. I like the fact that it's another 1-drop artifact removal spell, and I like the fact that it's a creature. I am running Umezawa's Jitte in my build. I'm running both swords because the swords combo with the 0/1s very, very well. Turn them into useful things. And I'm running Clamp for the same reason, but Jitte does not. However, Jitte is so good as the soul life gain spell, if you will, or the soul life gain card, dedicated slot. In this deck, it's the best life gain card ever printed, I think. I cannot think of one that's better than Umezawa's Jitte. So funny when you realize that at one time that title would have been held by Zurin Orb, and I have absolutely given like no consideration to playing a Zurin Orb in this deck. But anyway, so I do have Umezawa's Jitte in here, and having the Emperor's Shieldbreaker means that there's one more useful way that I could potentially equip the Jitte. It also, of course, can be just fed to Tevesh for a couple more cards. So it's a kill an artifact, replay them, eat them, draw 2 cards, which is a pretty good card. And then also along those lines, I've got Black Market Connections in here. I've been very happy with BMC. It produces your choice of treasure, card draw, and creature, and you can do any combination of all 3. So you can pay anywhere from 1 to 6 life, depending on how you put together the pieces. And however, you must do it on your main phase, which means that if you're at 1 with this out, you're probably dead, unless you have some life gain. So Umezawa Jitte coming in handy there as well. In these you can get these low life scenarios. You've played a lot with Necro and Ad Nauseam and all the other ways that we can play life, pay life. And you've got a BMC out, and your opponent manages to realize, hey, I can't win this game by card advantage, but I can say not kill your Mana Crypt, leave your BMC in play, point direct damage at your face, and hope that you kill yourself. And that's valid for your opponent to do. You need to make strategies that your opponent might play against you invalid, if possible, and Jitte does a fantastic job of that. It is also a card that just totally dominates against quite a few strategies. Green-based, white-based, that kind of stuff typically struggle against it. And in the mirror, if you can get it running, then it's very hard for them to gain cards off Tevesh, because they can make a couple of tokens or a Rog, but they activate Tevesh, and then in response you remove their creatures from the board, and they have nothing to feed to them, so they just +1 for no value other than +1. And while that ultimately will not result in a win for you. It can give you the time you need, because if they have a Tevesh, you're not doing well, but it can give you the time you need to find a solution without being buried under an additional mountain of cards that they're drawing, which is pretty good. Finally, it is an artifact. Excuse me. It is a, well, it was an artifact. So it's an artifact, so it's good for Mox Opal. And of course, you can play it for 0 off Ugin. But also, it is legendary, which means that you can tap it for mana with an Honor-Worn Shaku. In a roundabout way, right? You tap the Jete to untap the Shaku and tap the Shaku for mana. So Honor-Worn Shaku has been an absolute all-star in here. If you actually look at the number of legendaries, so we'll search for a legend, and then we'll just apply a filter. Legend, do I have, what filters? Legendary? Maybe I need to do that. Why am I, oh, let's reset. There's something going on with my filters, so let's try this again. Okay, so let's search for legendary, or legend. Okay, and then let's apply that. There we go. Now let's apply that filter. There we go. All right, so if you actually take a look, Honor-Worn Shaku can, so let's say we had all of our legendary permanents in play. But the point being that we'll have some combination of these in play in most games. We can tap Tevesh for mana, basically. So this taps for mana 1, 2. It, of course, taps itself 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Guild Artisan being a legendary. Potentially 12. These, of course, 13, 14, 15, 16, just because they already do that anyway. But in the off chance that for some reason they don't, you could get mana that way. So you have a 3 mana artifact here that can potentially tap effectively for 16. If we take the 4 on the left out, because they already make mana, we could say this thing, can basically tap for 12 mana, right? So, yeah, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so this is a 3-drop that taps for 12. I mean, in reality, you're only going to have some of those cards in play, maybe, a third of them in play, a fourth of them in play, in which case it's just a 3 casting cost Thran Dynamo, which is incredible. Card's great. I routinely would say it taps for like 5 or 6 mana per turn in some games. Very quickly becomes gross, and this is another innovation that's been turned out to be probably a mainstay for all time. Now, Guild Artisan, I think, is somewhat new. I'm not sure. Basically, the idea here is you throw down Rog on turn 1 always. On turn 2, if you have Curse of Opulence on turn 1, then you go Rog Curse, and then you can start attacking and getting treasures that way. On turn 2, though, if you happen to have Guild Artisan, you can play it for 2 mana. You immediately get the 2 mana back from the treasures that you make from attacking. So it effectively costs 0 on that turn. And then after that, it starts producing 2 mana per turn. Now, Guild Artisan is a card that does not work with anything but Rogue. It doesn't work with Tevesh, unless you do some crazy thing like Liquid Metal Torque your Tevesh, and then Karn your Tevesh, and then attack with your Tevesh. But in reality, basically, we can safely say it only works with Rogue. But it works so well with the card because you play it on turn 2, you attack, you get your 2 tokens, you do whatever you want, you spend the mana, and then on turn 3, you attack and you have 5 mana, and you play your Tevesh. So it ramps you to Tevesh without costing you tempo on turn 2, provided they don't actually have instant removal for Rock. But if they do, then it's still good because you spent 2 mana to play a Guild Artisan. They spent 2 mana to discard a card and kill a 0-drop that you can then play for 2 mana on the next turn anyway if you want it. So if they're killing Rog, like, that's not a bad thing. It's not a thing to be afraid of. So that's kind of it. I guess the other card that might be, I don't know, newish is Feed the Swarm. This card is destroy target enchantment or creature, and you lose life equal to the permanent's mana value. So you obviously want to play with this card because, Sylvan Library is a card, and so on and so forth, Rhystic Study or whatever. But between that and Ugin and Liquid Metal Torque making artifacts enchantments into artifacts, as well as potentially Smokestack eating them over time, we have a number of ways that we can deal with enchantments, thankfully. Cards, I don't love it because it doesn't kill artifacts most of the time, unless they happen to be enchantments, like, for example, a copy artifact, or a enchantment that gets artifacts, like, for example, a Urza Saga, which is incidentally another reason to play it, because sometimes you go first, and then they go turn 1 Saga, and you go turn 2 Feed the Swarm, and that's just like game over in some cases. So, that's somewhat new and played. And for the rest, I don't think there's anything particularly crazy in here. Obviously, one Black Market Connections had to replace something, so it replaced a 3-drop mana source. The card it replaced is Coalition Relic. So this thing, Coalition Relic, taps for 1 mana of any color. This thing makes treasure, so it effectively taps for 1 mana of any color. You can't charge it the way you could the Coalition Relic, but on the other hand, you don't have to sack the treasures, and you can save them, and in that way you can charge the BMC. So it's kind of a Coalition Relic with more power for your deck. I think that's it. So let's dive into some games. The games have been fantastic. Here you can see I lost 1 game today. Let's take a look at the last 7, I think it is, or maybe the last 30. So if we go, I'm going to scroll down. So the length of this screen is 30 games. So you can see there's 1 in 30 losses and 7:06:42 p.m. So we're going to go to that. We're going to make that the next cutoff point. Okay, so we're cutting that off. We're going to scroll up just a smidge. Good. So from here to here, you can see 0 losses. So that's 60-1 right there. 7:19:935 is the next cutoff point. So we'll scroll up to that. Oops. 7:19. Where is it? What happened? Oh, there it is. I went a little too far. So we're at 60-1. Okay, there we go. So there's a loss, 60-2, 60-3, but then we have to count in all the wins. So now we're at basically 90 games and 3 losses. So we're at 87-3, and that is 220.56 on the 11th. And then if we scroll up for the rest of the 11th and the 10th, we're going to get into some more losses. But this is basically around the time when I made a few adjustments to the deck. I also, if you notice, I was playing around with some ideas. I wasn't really liking them. You can see a couple losses on the 3rd. Then I played on the 10th. I'm still kind of tweaking my ideas. Still wasn't happy. I was trying to play like a more stacks build with Thorn of Amethyst and a bunch of other stuff like that. Wasn't really where this deck wants to be. And then you pick up on the 11th, and that's when you get the list. If you add in the extra roughly 10 games or so, the deck's at approximately 97-3 is where the final tally is. Like, you can, I think, count back a roughly 100 games, and it's about 3% loss rate, which I suppose is tells you how I think, right? A 3% loss rate rather than a 97% win rate. So I thought I'd go through some of the games, and I'll try to touch on the losses just so we can get a sense of, how to beat the stack or how it loses, and try to, let the folks who are who got their wins kind of get their props for beating the deck. Yeah, here, 5-color bad stuff, Master of Nature, Hellman, and then after that, unless I miss, I may have missed. Did I miss one? Master of Nature, 5-color bad stuff, and then we go back a long ways. Yep, and then we go back to the 11th, and no more losses till we get to the 10th. So starting from the 11th, the first loss was 5-color bad stuff. So let's take a look on the 15th. So we'll take a look at the losses, and then I'll go ahead and run through some of the more recent games. We'll go into the last 7 days or today and take a look to have the most current version. There were a couple cards I was tweaking in here and there, so if they come up, I'll let you know. But all of these are. So this is the first loss. I'm playing against 5 CBS, and he's playing Jin Gitaxis Progress Tyrant. And this looks too good to keep, or too good to pass, right? So we Mox Diamond out the tower, we play the Opal, we play the Clamp, we drop our commander, we clamp him, we draw some cards, grab a land, Thoughtseize the opponent. This is a great start. All right, opponent leads off with Mana Vault, which is, of course, you know, how a deck like that kind of needs to operate. They've got to get their artifact mana fast. They don't have Dark Rituals and stuff. No Jessica's Will. All right, so we're going to clamp. We're going to draw some cards, and okay, Dark Ritual's good. We missed a land, but that's fine. We'll get a land next turn. All right. Opponent has a Tezzeret. Mox. What? It's not good. And I have still no land. But hey, I'm going to reach out an Honor Worn Shaku. Play Rog, untap, clamp. Let's grab some land now. And there's the not a swamp. Hi, I'm not a swamp. You can't cast Thoughtseize. Brutal. Thoughtseize might actually made this game work. Instead, when it gets a Jingatoxis, and I'm still not drawing lands, Thoughtseize to clear the way, Edict away the Tezzeret. I literally just need one more land to be completely fine in this game, ironically, because of Fiery Confluence. But I don't draw any. So Desperation, I'm digging, and I still don't draw any, and I give up. So this is one way the deck loses. You basically draw, what was that? How many cards? How deep are we? 19 cards, and you get, you know, 2 lands and a couple of artifact mana, and your opponent gets a insane start. This is what, turn 4? This is turn 4. 3, 6, 7, 8. You know, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Opponent has 17 mana on turn 4, and I've got 4, 5 maybe, right? So, so yes, that is one of the ways that the deck can lose, and it will happen from time to time. That's the format, and you just kind of have to, eat it. Now we played a couple more games. I'll hit those up, and then we'll look at the other losses, and then potentially run through some of those games as well. So I played a best of 3. This is a very fair hand. Going first, it's a keep. Going second, it's very questionable as to whether or not that's a keep. Might be too slow, but this looks good. I mean, I can potentially deal with Soul Ring or a Jingatoxis that gets snuck out somehow. And Ragavan's a ton of pressure on a blue deck. Of course, drawing the Crypt just makes it a little bit silly. I'm going to move the mic and hope that that means that, look at this, I get my opponent's Crypt Monolith. Oh my gosh. This is just, yeah. As dumb as my opponent's draw was in the last game, is my draw this game, right? So I'm going to go ahead and play Rog here and not the Guild Artisan. Guild Artisan only triggers on your commander and only on Rog, basically, like I was saying. So we'll go ahead and get Rog down now, and then that way I can just play the Artisan next turn. Port, lovely right here. We'll go ahead and play that. Costs no mana to play it. Of course, I'm not going to play the Port until I hit him with Rag and see what I get. There's always, like, I could hit a Brainstorm and then Brainstorm into, like, a Strip Mine, for example. I hit Ponder, so I'll use the Opal for Ponder. All right, Sword and a City of Brass. Sword looks really good against the blue deck. Let's go ahead and play this Marsh Flats. And with that in mind, I'm going to run out the Sword and see if my opponent has a counters. My opponent does not have a counter, I don't believe, so I'm going to go ahead and play Liliana, and let's go ahead and start getting into my opponent's hand now this way. I give them another turn of mana since I can Abrade or Liliana. Most things that they can play are already answered, and with this I can take options away from my opponent. Follow it up with a double discard next turn and just really double discard and port. I mean, just make things horrible for him. Obviously, he realizes that the jig is up in that game. It's time to concede, so we move on to the third game of the series. And same thing. And yeah, that looks pretty crazy. I think I keep this. I'm going to ask to mulligan to 6 here. Get to lead with Rog. Opponent preordains. Do a mana crypt top. This is a great start, obviously. So I'm going to have to keep pace. So let's see if we can do that. It's definitely one way. All right, I like the way this is looking. Opponent has the ability to possibly get Toxis down this turn depending on how much ramp he's holding, but I have removal in hand, so I'm less concerned with that. And so I feel it's safe to allow my opponent to develop just a little bit longer. GPS over there, pretty good card. I'm appreciative that my 5CBS here has incorporated one of our tech cards into his other deck. I think that card is good enough that you should probably put it in every deck. If your deck can't support this card, for example, you don't have enough artifact mana, you should fix that first, and then you should put this card in every deck, because the format is loaded with lots and lots of combo, and that is an anti-combo card, one of the best ones in the game right now. And I'd love to see more one-sided nastiness like this in some ways. In other ways, I wouldn't. But at any rate, I applaud him for running it. I've got, of course, the answer, or at least one answer. I'm going to kill that for efficiency's sake. Get my Lotus down, make some dorks. Okay, clamp. All right, play Urza's, a Talisman, and a Curse. And then I can use the Thrall token to attack, and then I'll clamp it next turn. So I am letting my opponent have, a crypt a little bit longer than I'd like to, but I'm also setting him up for potentially multiple targets. But also, if you look, it's the reverse of the first game. I've got 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 mana to my opponent's 7. So, I've got twice as much mana as he's got, and it's going to just get worse from there. Plus, twice as much mana and like 6 times as many cards, or 3 times as many cards, because I have 3 cards now, but I'm going to make 2 guys and then clamp them, and so this becomes 6. So that gives me a total of 9. So he's got 3, I've got 9, so triple. Even if my opponent draws an extra card with the top, I'm going to have a draw phase 2. Plus, you've got Saga, so it just. There's no coming back from that. So that was an interesting series and a fun one. And then down the road, I had his Lost to Master of Nature. And we did end up playing 2 out of 3 ultimately, but not right away. So he didn't play me for a little while. I believe well, we'll see, but I think I drew something that was instructive for me in this game, or at least I had an experience that was instructive for me in this game. My opponent's playing mono green, Azusa, Lost but Sucking. And you can say I had Goldspan Dragon at the time. And I decide I'm going to keep this, but my opponent's double mulliganed. I'm not thinking like, how is he gonna beat me here? Well, like many games in which you lose that you probably shouldn't lose, as well as many games that you probably should, the opponent starts with a Lotus, and from there, things get a little crazier. Actually gets to grab 3 lands. So my opponent gets to, what is it? If you control on this, a Planeswalker. No, it gets 2. So it gets a immediate draw 2 to replace some of the cards that he's lost. And has a tremendous tempo, but down to only 1 action card and 1 land, right? We know exactly what's in his hand. So I'm not going to strip mine here. I'm way behind. I'm going to try to get caught up. So we'll go ahead and tutor for most likely a crypt here. Ancient Tomb, Petrified Field, and the last card in my opponent's hand is a forest, right? So, it should be in great shape. Oh, Guild Artisan is what I tutored for. I don't remember what the reasoning was, but I'm not going to burn treasure tokens on a Feed the Swarm. Like, I'm not going to kill this thing. But I know he has a forest and 1 unknown, whatever his top deck is. So, while I could try to do something like to constrain his mana a little bit or remove some of his resources, it makes more sense. First of all, he's got a Petrified Field, so it's not great to strip mine the Ancient Tomb. Secondly, it makes more sense to just develop on my end and just trust that my opponent's not going to top deck a bomb. I need him to not basically draw something that just kills me on the spot. And then as long as that doesn't happen, I'll take over the game in short order. So, I think I got the treasures because of the dragon, because I was thinking at the time my opponent had 4 or 5 cards in hand. I was thinking, did he? I had a couple, but no, I was thinking basically that I wanted to Jessica's Will, dragon, and have basically if I had the dragon with the Guild Artisan, I have doubled the amount. It's basically a mana flare, right? So. My opponent, however, Ancient Stirrings off the top into Karn. Karns me, kills the treasure. And now, what can I even do here? Well, I have to get up to dragon mana, right? Draws a Guild Artisan removal off the top. I do get to Jessica's Will here. Play Rag. Play some land. Opponent finds a Tireless Tracker, makes a clue, kills my artifacts, starts drawing with the clue, and Tracker Azusa is a pretty savage combo to try to deal with. I'm going to Tevesh and see if I can maybe find something here. Okay, there's Karn removal. And I've got Deluge to clear the board, but here's the problem. Opponent's drawing like 3, 4, 5 cards per turn. Now he's got Ramanop and is just going absolutely ape. And now begins Strip Mine Recursion with like triple Strip Mine per turn thanks to Crop Rotation and Ramanop and Azusa. And there's just no, it was insane, right? Like, Ancient Stirring seems so mediocre. It's top 5 cards your library and grab a land most of the time, but the fact that it hit Karn there right off the top, followed by Tracker, Disenchant, Ramanop, like, okay, that's all right though. Sometimes like you're just gonna lose. And the thing is, my opponent had good cards in his deck, and when you play with good cards, sometimes you do good things, even when you're in a tight spot like top decking. So good on Master of Nature, you got the win there. I'm gonna fast forward, and I believe we play again. Yeah, a little while later, and this time things go well. I believe at this point I have Dragon out, which, if you notice, Dragon was not good there and actually kind of allowed me to, Azusa, kind of led me down the wrong path for tutor targets. So I believe the dragon is gone. It may still be in, but it should be gone by now. If not, we'll see it go soon. And I was happy this game because I didn't know they printed the original birds with the old border online. It's so pretty. I went and immediately sold whatever bird I had and picked this one up for almost the exact same price. I was so pleased to see this. It's so nice. I love the old borders and art so much. Anyway, we're going to play a game called Bolt the Bird. Opponent gets a port down, and that is fine. I now have a black market connections and a land drop. Sorry about that. Phone going crazy. All right. Opponent gets their commander out, an extra land and a Llanowar Elf. I'm going to go ahead and just pay the 6 life. I think I almost always pay 6 with BMC. And then we're going to go ahead and draw some cards here. And after the card drawing comes the hemming. So we get Conduit of Worlds. Another way to play lands from your graveyard. That's pretty gnarly. And this is Triumph. So I didn't realize there was yet another Crucible of Worlds, essentially. All right, so we're going to go ahead and once again bolt the bird, basically. I'm going to kill that Llanowar Elf. In order to constrain our opponent's mana and reduce their options for the turn. When it has, unfortunately, however, a City of Traders, so they can slam Ugin, which would not have been possible without City, right, or something that makes 2 mana, so they get to kill Tevesh here. But it's not too bad because we can go ahead and take that off the board thanks to BMC. I'll go ahead and pay 6, by the way. Alright, so I can get Chandra down, grab some mana, play a Dark Confidant, rather, and kill the Azusa, smash into Ugin, And we'll get a port down and shut down that city of traders. So now if my opponent wants to play additional resources, they're going to have to kill some resources to do it. And my opponent has had enough. I'm at 22, but all the free mana and cards meant that, you know, Ugin was just super easy, barely an inconvenience. All right, we're moving on. So that was Master of Nature, and I don't know if I played a third game against Master of Nature. If I see him, we'll hit it up, and then we've got Hellman, which is the third loss to cover. And Hellman 911 is playing Emery, and this is a very questionable keep. So if I'm going first, this hand's okay. I go first turn, tower, sack my guy, talisman, and then thought sees, you know, like a mana crypt or something out of my opponent's hand. I don't know why I thought I was going first in this game. I thought I was, so I keep. And this hand going second is absolute trash. Not keepable whatsoever, and I am going second. So I am basically doomed. I don't think I've ever seen Emery not be come into play on turn 1, as well as every turn after that you try to kill it. It's basically unkillable. It's one of those commanders that cheats hard on the commander. Oh, my opponent Force of Wills the Talisman here. Brutal. And now my opponent's going to be drawing 2 cards per turn. I've got absolutely nothing. I kept a horrible hand. I'm about to concede, but let's see what my top card is. Yeah, it's a concession. I'm dead. Yeah, this card is on my list of commanders that I would ban. I think that cards that basically the commander attacks, this card just laughs at him, and cards that do that are probably not good. But also this card funnels, like it plays too closely into rewarding you for running artifacts when artifacts are the biggest problem / payout in the format. It's already too good to play artifacts, and this card just makes it too gooder, and that's not okay in my view. But you know, it's a 1 casting cost commander that always costs 1 and draws cards and makes it so that you can't deal with Soul Rings at all. It feels a little stupid. Like, how do I even kill this thing, right? I mean, they just replay it and get more fuel. Like, you can't, you know, like, what do you do about this card? The only way this deck deals with it or contains it is that you need a recurring source of removal. So Umezawa's Jitte is an example. Priest of the Fallen Gods is an example. Or you need mass artifact removal, and then you kill this thing, and then they can't replay it simply because they don't have enough artifacts to make it cheap. And so that gives you time to continue to attack mana. Like all games that this deck wins, in general, you need to control their mana. All right, Hellman 911. I did not play any other games against there, but if we roll back, we can see some games backwards. So if I see any other games against Master of Nature, so we'll cover the Hellman 911 game running back the other direction, just to get a better idea of how things went. Honestly, part of the problem in that game, though, he's playing Ragavan here, so he loves his 1 mana commanders, I guess. Part of the problem with that game also is that my hand was a mulligan. That was not a keepable hand going second. It was atrocious, and I pretty much knew I was dead as soon as my opponent played their first land, and I went, wait, what? So anyway, all right, but Hellman here is playing Ragavan, so it's not the same, but we'll at least take a look at how that game went, just to get a sense of another variation on monocolor theme. In this game, I've just got an absolute banger of the start, so we'll just run out a ton of cards. Hope that my opponent doesn't have a solution here, and if he has no solution to this, yeah, he has no solution. And if he doesn't kill my artifacts, then it's game over, basically. All right, yeah, it's game over. Remember, the Mox Hammer doesn't make mana until it does. Opponent has a counter spell here. Counters me into a Shieldred's Edict, which is cool. So, are we going to bug out? Oh, we're going to bug out. I guess they countered me into an Edict? Yeah. And then I kill his commander and then follow up by playing mine or something. I can't remember what happened here. But yeah, I was surprised to see the trickery. I do remember that. Give me a moment, please. Yeah, what's up, babe? Okay, love you. All right. Anyway, so unfortunately we didn't get another match against his blue deck there. I guess there's a couple here. I don't know if these games are against the blue deck. We'll try and see. I'm trying to see, you know, if we have something against the actual deck that beat this one. Oh yeah, Emery. Okay, so here we've got 2 games against Emery, so we can run through those to kind of complete the series. So you can see I was playing around with Smash to Dust. My opponent's going first. And as always, 100% of every game I've ever played against Emery, as far as I can remember, it's turn 1 Emery. Always, always. Nice to see Paradoxical Outcome hit the bin there, since that card's just insane. The good thing here is that if my opponent does activate the Emery, they're putting themselves at risk to getting hit by the Rag. So the Ragavan kind of takes some of their options away. All right. So now it's a matter of, hey, can we get through? And the answer is nope. Okay. I'm not going to throw a Ragavan. Opponent twists. Interesting. Hits a Jeweled Amulet. Twister is interesting because it empties the graveyard and Emery field feeds off artifacts in the graveyard, but of course it does make sense in a deck where you're puking out so much mana. So in that regard, I do understand the reason for the twist. I don't think it's a bad card to play at all. It makes perfect sense. But it does come with a little bit of a downside for the opponent. All right. And here it's a matter of, do I risk going Chandra, like Chandra, for example, into one open blue? You know, what's the play here? I decide to hold back when it charges up their Jeweled Amulet. I'm waiting. I've got the opposition agent, so I'm hoping maybe I can catch him with on a tutor. And I feel like I'm probably not going to, and then I see the Moonsilver Key. Super happy. So now it's just a matter of, does this stick? Go for the agent, and it does. Yum. Thank you. So these are, my opponent has Mystic Forge, Swan Song, Windfall. This is their hand. I don't know why I got to see it right there. Yeah, I'm not sure why. I think that's a bug. But anyway, we're looking at all these cards here. Interesting deck. Painter's Servant, blah, blah, blah. All right, I'm going to take their Crypt. Opponent plays the City of Traders. And Windfalls, I believe. Oh, Mystic Forges. Exiling a island. And now we can get over to my turn. I've got that Crypt waiting for me. So 2 Crypts. It's kind of rough, but look at that. I was going to intent for the Karn, and Karn just rises to the top for me. So gross. Let's start killing artifacts while we're here. Let's start killing creatures while we're here. So gross. And yeah, I'm good. It does have Windfall, so I know I'm gonna eat it here, but we've got most of the cards we needed here. Opponent's down to 3 cards in hand. Unknown cards at this point. Alright. So for my turn, Liliana eats an Emery. Karn eats a Jeweled Amulet. Chandra provides me some mana, which is about to cast my commander. And from there, we're going to start hitting my opponent as well. And Hellman concedes. That was game 719, so the next game here. So this is for the set of 3, which is expanded across multiple days. Yeah, Emery again. I have a mulligan, I think. Well, this is actually keepable, especially if I'm going first, but you know, this has Vampiric Tutors and a lot of mana, so I guess I would keep this. Let's see what I do. Yeah, I do. Paradise Mantle, Chrome Mox, turn 1 Emery, as always. Into Mox Helpful Jeweled Amulet. Why not? It's just so busted, man. Workshop, Opal, Helm. And this is where I think why I think I actually win the game. Opponent's down to 2 cards in hand, has a Windfall. It's just so gross. Luckily, I can Vampiric Tutor in response and deterministically get my next card, but also take 1 card away from them, so they're still going to pick up 6. Just insane. So what do I put on top? I put a Come on. Karn on top. I put Karn on top. There's a helm in play. There's a land in play. So all I need is a little bit of fast mana, and I could slam that Karn. But I get a hand that doesn't do much. When it's doing some grinding station action, hits my Necro and a Strip Mine. I'm kind of glad to see it. I just need some fast mana. I don't find it. I find a Braid instead. I'm thinking about abrading the Emery, the side that's the play. It was that or Opposition Agent, maybe sit on that. But I do the Emery so that I can maybe stall him just slightly, and I want him to, you know, spend some time playing the Emery here and not doing much else. Unfortunately, my opponent plays Urza. It's just so bad. This game is a game of desperation. I am actually unsure how I win this game at all. I know Karn has to play a role in it, so... Alright, we'll get Karn down and start killing. We kill the Mox. When it has Urza, spins it, hits a Gilded Drake, decides not to give me a 3/3 blocker, which makes a lot of sense. I'll go ahead and chump. Karn drops to only 1 loyalty. Alright, we're going to float. Grab a Soul Ring. Use the mana to play a Tevesh. Remember, I'm feeding off their Helm. If you're wondering how this is happening, I go ahead and kill their Mana Crypt as well. Pass the turn. Not going to port them. I'm going to play the Lotus Petal. Spins the Urza. Hits nothing, just a land. Swings in. I get to flash out Opposition Agent. Thankfully, it's 2 mana. Block, 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 and Karn is down to 1 again. Emery's dead. Of course, it can come back out. Opponent does play it and gets a Mana Crypt and an LED as an option. I'll go ahead and kill their Seed of the Synod. Find a Ragavan, which is really nice. Make some blockers. Get the Ragavan down. Play a land. Play the Rog here. And a Smokestack, which means I'm off port again, unfortunately. Pass for the turn. Opponent has a Mana Vault that they can't use, but they can feed it into Urza, so they do. They hit Intuition, and this is where I win the game because remember that Opposition Agent I played oh so long ago? Yeah, now I get to pick 3 cards and put all 3 of them into my hand. And with that, my opponent says, oh, Opposition Agent, and concedes. I chose, by the way, Cyclonic Rift, Fierce Guardianship, and Winter Orb as my 3 targets. So if you're wondering how that works, I get a free counter spell. I'm going to Rift all this crap out of play after I Karn away the 0 drops. I'm going to Karn kill the 0 drop, probably the Lotus Petal. Rift all the rest of this garbage out of play. And then I'm going to slam a Winter Orb on them and close the door on this game. Not in that order, though. I played the Winter Orb first, play it so that it costs 1 mana, and then play the Rift at 6 using his Helm of Awakening. So I thought this was actually an amazing game, and hopefully you enjoyed watching it, and you thought it was pretty amazing too, because at some point in the beginning of this game, surely you looked at it and said, how the hell did you win this game at all? That's what I was thinking when I was playing. How the hell am I going to win this game? But you know, it's good not to concede. So sometimes you just get it. Now, if we take a look at the games from today, we covered the loss against Hellman. So retroactively, I won the 2 out of 3 series against this blue deck, but the most recent one was a loss. Outside of that, the rest are wins, and we can run through those. I think I had an interesting game though from yesterday that I would like to cover, if I can find it. So it was on the 30th, and then there was a pause, a really interesting game, and then I took a break. Or it was on the 27th. So I think it was either against Take 2DA or one of these others. Could have been one of these against Take 2DA as well. We'll take a look at it. I'm just kind of hitting random games because there's just too many. There's too many to go through. So we'll try to find the interesting ones and see if we can against Rashmi. Yeah, obviously this doesn't look too interesting. I mean, I have a Lotus, so basically, when you see Lotus, the game is probably not interesting. It's just decisive. Opponent gets an early Soul Ring. Yeah. Tevesh, I make some guys. Opponent has leadership. Oh yeah, this was the interesting one. Never seen this card. It's been around for a while. 2019, and I've literally had no clue this card existed. I would have been playing this in all my blue decks at the time. Had I realized this card is utterly insane. Destroy all of target player's commanders. Like put them back in the command zone, draw a card for 3 mana in blue. This is insane. This is like, I don't even... Anyway, so yeah, returns from the battlefield to the command zone. So Rograkh now costs 2 extra and Tevesh costs 2 extra. And I don't even get to draw extra cards here because I'm plussing. Like, this doesn't send them to hand. It sends them to the command zone. This card's so nuts. So my start, which, like I said, Lotus makes broken, not this time. And I opted not to kill his Soul Ring here, so now I'm eating, I'm paying the price for that. Opponent does not slam Rashmi, so they have a counter spell, so now I have to play around a counter, because we've got the read on that, but... Go ahead and play the Rakdos Signet, see if I can bait him. Go ahead and play Rog, just to get Rograkh on board. That gives me a solution to Rashmi if it comes down. Rhystic Study, another nightmare card when you're struggling for mana, and I am struggling just a bit. Fortunately, I drew Gilded Lotus. Not exactly fortunately, but I do have that Urza Saga ticking up. I really want to kill this Soul Ring here, but I'm just 100% sure that my opponent has a negate effect or something to that extent. Something along those lines, right? I'm going to place a Felwar. Okay, so my plan here is to kind of work around the study with the Saga, use it to apply some pressure, as well as get the mana to pay. There's that ring again. Trick Bind. I don't even get to. I don't even get to search for a artifact instead of being a swamp. Anyway, at this point, I'm feeling a little desperate, so I'm gonna. But I'm also thinking like, okay, well they've got 2 mana. This is the same mana they had before, but maybe they were leaving 2 blue up for Trick Bind and not for a negate effect. So now my take on the situation is different. So I'm going to try to kill the Soul Ring and pay for the Rhystic Study, of course. And it gets Flusterstorm. So they did have a counter in both cases. Not great. Not great at all. I just burned through a Vandal Blast. There's Rashmi. If I Rograkh the Rashmi now, they will get to draw a card from the Rhystic Study. If I don't, then they can get to draw a card when they play a card on my turn. Alternately, if they don't have a card to play on my turn, then of course I can kill it and pay for the Rhystic Study. I don't lose. I'm not feeding my opponent. So those are my options. But there's some risk because the Force of Negation can only be played on my turn. So if I play this on my turn, my opponent may be able to counter it with a card that they couldn't counter it any other way. I still decide that the game's too close. 3 cards to 5, and I'm mana tight, and he's got more. So it's like, I think that with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and just not feed my opponent an extra card and take the risk. Tower off the top is a very welcome sight. It actually allows me to do something quite nice, which is to play this Thran Dynamo. Oh, excuse me. So sorry. And then play the Rograkh and pay for it. And my opponent has a Pongify in response, so they do have their first spell each turn, so that's unfortunate. Targets my Construct, interestingly. Instead of his Rashmi, he could have at least given himself a blocker, but I guess this makes sense because this would have been too big. So that's something. Anyway, so they get to draw a card off of that, and he reveals Veil of Summer, so lovely. But given the fact that I'm about to lose 2 mana and lose tempo, it's worth giving my opponent a card here to play a card that's going to give me cards that I can play now and get an extra point of damage in while I'm at it. So I'm going to go ahead and play the Sword. and I have to give my opponent a Ristic Study card to do it. But that sets me up for next turn nicely, so that my opponent could, while they could ignore potentially 4 or 7 damage per turn for a little while, setting themselves up. It's much harder to ignore when you're getting hit with a sword and I'm drawing extra cards. But it also means it's much harder to stop, because my opponent may not have a creature that will survive the hit from the sword outside of their commander. And if he uses a tap 6 for his commander here, then I could will removal, and I'd be okay with that. And if he doesn't, well, then I'm going to attack Rog. I'm attacking Rog because I don't want to make any bounce my opponent have good. And as soon as I did this, I went, shit. That was a mistake. And I'll tell you why I thought it was a mistake. And the reason was the best card my opponent could have right now at this point is probably Cyclonic Rift. If my opponent has Rift, I should have tapped the Thran Dynamo and not the Badlands. I also should have considered whether or not I wanted to Phyrexian Tower away the Thrall token pre-combat. So tap the Dynamo and the Tower, so get 5 mana. Use 2 to equip the sword and 3 to cast Yawgmoth's Will. Then I attack with the team, and if my opponent has Rift, I pick up all this stuff, and I've got a Will running. Tower's tapped, but I've got 3 mana here. I can play the Urza Saga, that's 4. I can play the Jeweled Lotus. I can play Rollick, Vandal Blast, whatever. That looked pretty good to me. But man, I decided, what's the chances he's got a Rift? Play the Tower, go for it, and the punish. See, the other thing I could have done is I could have cast my commander pre-combat, and then my opponent would have had to Rift in response, or let it resolve. If he let it resolve and I immediately sacked to draw cards, well, if I immediately plus, then he Rifts in response, and I have nothing to sacrifice, so that wouldn't have actually mattered. So never mind, scratch that. Anyway, unfortunate and nasty against when facing a Ristic Study, of course. So I'm going to have to give my opponent another card, because I can't afford to lose the tempo here. So Cyclonic Rift, draw a card. We'll go ahead and pay the Rakdos Signet, though, and I decide I'm not going to feed him a card off the Rog, which means I can't Sword of Fire and Ice him next turn, unfortunately. Alright, so when he plays a spell on my turn, he gets to draw a card. He's still floating mana, so he's probably got a spell to play on my turn. Fortunately, here the Barbarian Ring could come in handy. I could, for example, throw away the Mox Diamond and then make a play that my opponent might counter, which would then give me Threshold. So I'm thinking through, exactly how I want to do this. Unfortunately, if my opponent plays a counter spell now due to this Hippocamp, they're going to be able to draw a card off their counter magic. I just have to risk it. Oops. Alright, so it does stick, so I'm going to go for the sword. And that sticks, so I'm going to go for the Rog. And I pay for all of it, so my opponent doesn't get any free cards here. And my thought is, I knew, that was the other thing. At the time, I've lost the memory of the game, but I remember knowing that they have the Veil of Summer. And so one of the things that I was aware of is that I couldn't count on Deadly Rollick from the graveyard until there was green mana tapped. And I had to be kind of cautious how I handle things. But this way, I've got a threat that could potentially kill the Hippo. Now, my opponent, I've not cast a black or blue spell, so my opponent doesn't get to draw a card for the Veil of Summer, but they are playing a card on my turn, so they do get to draw a card from the Hippo. So they're just cycling this off, which I'm very pleased to see, because that would have been a possible counter effect for the things that I'm trying to do. Plus, on a different turn, that might have drawn him 2 cards. Alright, so now my opponent's going for a Oakheim Adversary. I'm pretty surprised to see this over their commander. Costs 2 less. If I have a green permanent, I don't. When it deals combat damage, me draw a card. So it's just a overpriced Ophidian, so I'm glad to see that. Play a Mox Amber, which this is a enchantment creature, horsefish, but not a legendary. So currently Mox Amber doesn't produce any mana, which is nice. I'm going to take some damage there. Paradise Mantle has since been cut, so this is one of those draws that we kind of don't want to see here. You can see how useless it actually is. All right, I'm going to swing in with Rog. We got the sword. Opponent thinks that he can block, so that explains a little bit more about why they made the play they made. And now we get to take this down and draw a card they did not realize. And with that in mind, I've got the feeling that they don't have a counter. I just have that vibe. So I'm going to go for Will. And I am paying for everything here, by the way. Let's take that thing out so it doesn't hit me. And let's pay for a Vandalblast. Plus, each time I'm paying the heuristic study tax. And finally, we'll pay the Lotus. What a lovely, lovely turn. Big swing. Notice the Barbarian Ring sitting there, not being a swamp still. Just dealing damage to me and doing nothing. And at this point, my opponent draws a card and concedes. So that was a super awesome game. So now you've seen two comebacks with the deck. And let's take a look at a couple of games from today. There was a desperation game here in the Ulf the Wolf battles. My opponent decided that they wanted to, keep throwing themselves at this deck, I guess, to try to extract a win, and they were unable to do so. But it came pretty close. I don't think my opponent's deck's very good, but I do think my opponent's deck is very good at exploiting a weakness if you have that weakness in your deck. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So Ulf the Wolf's playing Karlov the Ghost Council. So Karlov the Ghost Council, it's a 2/2. Whenever you gain life, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So 4/4, 6/6, and so forth. For 2 mana, the same casting cost as Karlov, white and black. You can remove 6 counters, 6 +1/+1 counters to exile a creature, so you can Swords to Plowshares for 2 mana, but you cost yourself 6 power. And what this thing can do is it can completely exploit somebody's deck that might be lacking in cheap creature removal, or whose deck relies on cheap creature removal based on killing a thing using their toughness, for example, lightning bolt, chain lightning, and so forth. This thing can easily outpace those very quickly, and from there, it generates card advantage because you have to chump quickly. You get in a situation where if you don't chump block, you die on the spot from commander damage, and then shortly after that, you can't chump block because it just removes your blockers before you do. You can't really win a race when it has a Swords to Plowshares built on it. And yeah, so this thing just kind of exploits the commander damage rule and a lack of removal. Fortunately, this deck does not lack removal, so we will see how things go. But I have to mulligan and mulligan again. Wasn't satisfied with any of my hands. They weren't broken enough. This one looks acceptable, but not as good as you'd think, right? So we've got, this is actually 1, 2, 3. This is actually 4 mana, right? So Crypt, Shatter Skull is 2, Chrome Mox Imprinting Inquisition is 3, and an Opal's 4. I actually decided that because I'm going first, I'm actually going to Inquisition, so now I need to draw a spell to make the Chrome Mox mana. And the Opal is not actually mana until I get another artifact. So while this hand is technically 4 mana, it's actually only 1 or 2 right now. So I decide between my opponent's ability to instantly sneak out a hexproof indestructible effect, or for 1 mana, or the ability to play a mana and start attacking and then do the same effect. I'd rather take the one that sits on the board and force him to leave some mana up. And because my opponent's playing black, I'm probably going to play the Opal. Does the game want to progress? I'm not sure what's going on here. Things are running slow. I can hear my laptop chugging really hard. I can try closing YouTube for now. Okay. We're gonna progress. Okay, I guess the game's gonna continue. All right, so I find a tower off the top, which is great. That's like, fine, 2 mana, right? So now I'm real close to being able to play my commander. I don't know why I have to use the skip button, but apparently I do. Game's not progressing. I finally find a spell, the Mind Twist, which allows me to use the Phyrexian Tower and get some thralls down. And then my opponent, for their turn, I mean, we know they've got tons of lands, and they've got this blacksmith's skill, so they can make their guy indestructible at instant speed as long as they have 1 white mana up. But they have no way to get through and hit Tevesh, except for that. Oh god, that's a problem. I top deck Shieldred's Edict, so I can Edict and make them sack a creature. Obviously, like, I'm expecting they'll kill their Karlov, and then I'll have to figure it out from there. But first things first, let's play Rog and dig real deep and see if we can find a solution to both creatures in one shot. Once again, things are acting strange. I don't, but I play Liliana, and for some reason that I cannot fathom, my opponent sacrifices Sarah to the Liliana instead of Karlov, which means they have no way to kill my Planeswalker because I have a chump blocker in play, unless they have a way to get through here, which they don't. This is crazy, right? You kill the Karlov and then you just replay it, and then attack, and it gets bigger, and you kill one of my Planeswalkers. Like, that's the correct play here. So, opponent probably had me in pretty dire straits, but with that mistake, they do not. And I'm starting to dig into their hand a little bit. They've just got no way to grow their creature. I kill their Karlov for the turn. I start doing Planeswalker shenanigans when it's down to just a few cards here. Sends in with a Shambling Vent, chump. I'm in a K command, killing their Vault of Whispers, and regrowing my Rog, who's in Ancestral Recall at that point. So I kill your artifact, draw an Ancestral Recall, and then finally my opponent concedes. So I don't know why is the game chugging. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close Magic, I'm going to open back up, and we'll take a look at the rest of these. So I think there were some really interesting games against Wolf the Wolf. My wife Katie and my son Thomas. All right, let's go back in there. I was like, I hope it doesn't show my password. Fortunately, they've dotted it out like you should. Okay. No, we're not looking at constructed. We don't want to go to replay. Come on. It's going to take a second. MTGO is like this for me all the time. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible client. The only good thing about it is the cards look like the cards that they're supposed to look like, and don't do all the wacky bells and whistles that some of the other clients have. I do appreciate that. I don't need any of that. I don't need my I mean, possibly unpopular opinion, but I don't need my Magic games to be like a Tom and Jerry cartoon or something. But I suppose if I grew up watching the zany stuff that's available to watch these days and spent the amount of time with that kind of show being the norm for me, that I might have a different opinion. And I am not, in fact, their target audience. Their target audience is much younger than me, so that may be partly why. All right, we'll take a look at the next Wolf the Wolf battle. I believe there's a couple of good ones in here, and certainly, was looking to find a victory here. All right, it's going to be the same commander each time, and of course the same for me as well. So going first, this hand's a keep because of the dress. So Dire Tactics, a couple of cards in there that I don't like. I don't know what this Aerialist does. Not worried about that. Dark Confidant, however, is a card that I would love to take but can't. We are once again frozen. So that did not fix anything. So I probably have to restart the whole computer, which I'm not willing to do. I may have to abandon my plans to run through these Wolf the Wolf games. But as you can see, that is right there basically the entire game, right? My opponent is never coming back from this kind of tempo. It just gets worse. You can see I had Tome of Legends in here. This card is... it's a card that, like, here's the problem. You notice I'm winning. I'm winning and the card is good. Card's really not so good when you're losing. So it is a bit snowbally, so I decided to cut the Tome of Legends actually and just run some extra defense against losing to fast starts. Excuse me. Which is the Embereth Shieldbreaker, so that's in the place of the Tome of Legends. I'd rather just kill Soul Rings on turn 1. All right, so game 3. And also, then feed it to a Skull Clamp or Commander. And another relatively uninteresting game. The interesting thing is I'm taking a big risk. I do have a Lotus start, but I don't really have a Lotus start because I'm missing a land to make it all come together. We'll skip ahead now and see how that plays out. So I go ahead and dump these because I'm more concerned about a Duress than I am about a Disenchant. Didn't draw mana, so and I get hymned for the Artisan, which would have made artifact mana. So this is getting worse and worse. Thankfully, I finally found some, so I go ahead and get Tevesh down. Opponent has a Nyx Fleece Ram, which is going to cause them to make their commander grow each turn. I do kill their commander rather than the ram here, simply to buy some time, thinking that'll be... I don't know if that was, to be honest, in hindsight, I'm not sure that that was necessarily correct. Don't know why I have to use the big skip button, but we're going to do it. And my opponent has Shadow Spear, Soul Attendant. So Shadow Spear, +1/+1 trample and lifelink. That is a big problem. And I am still missing land. I'm still hurting quite bad, so I'm doing some desperation tricks. So now that the commander comes down, it's going to grow right away because of the Soul Attendant. Then they're going to hit me and it's going to grow again. They're going to attack rather, and it's going to grow again. All right, so I'm going to swing in back, take a card out of hand from my opponent, create tokens, give my opponent a bunch more life, and now look at Shadow Spear. Boom. Kill the commander. Grows to epic proportion. I play an opposition agent. It grows even further. All right, I'm going to send in. I get to kill the Soul Attendant that way. I attempt to abrade the Shadow Spear, knowing they have Blacksmith's skill in their hand. They use the skill to protect their Shadow Spear, and then I kill their Karlov instead. Opponent's then down to just a Ram and a Nyx Fleece, and I've got Necro. So I over-Necro because my hand is a little bit unexciting, and I turn it into something quite a bit more exciting. I'm going to just replace Karlov and get some counters. Unfortunately, we kind of whipped through the turns where I was in dire straits. And at this point, I have Necro going. And what we're going to do is we're just going to play a little game with life totals using Crypt, Necro, and Black Market Connections, as well as Jitte, to make sure that my life total stays where it needs to be. Well, that's if my opponent doesn't concede. But I forgot. I had a dream. I had a Death Cloud there, so opponent just dies. But after that, after the Death Cloud resolves and I lose a bunch of life and BMC's running and Necro's out, without the Jitte, I could, and Crypt is out, right? I could very easily die here if it wasn't for the fact that I can make a 3/2 and then start gaining 4 life per turn, -1, and just BMC for just the one treasure. That was what, game 3? So game 4 against Ulf the Wolf. Ew. I guess I have to use the others. I'm going to try to skip it, correct? But yeah, same commander. And I keep a hand going second that is only capable going first. And I'm going to pay for it because this game's going to get quite crazy and bad. I have no real removal. All right, we're going to have to skip ahead like before, unfortunately. I've got a Ragavan, but what good is a Ragavan against a deck loaded with a bunch of, you know, just dorky dorks that I can remove, right? And like I said, I have no removal here. So I'm going to get some mana down. I'm kind of in trouble. Opponent now has a Dark Confidant as well. It's going to bash me in the face for 6. This is brutal, and I'm missing land drops, so I'm going to play a BMC. Hopefully that's enough to get me there. It is not. Opponent's going to Ballista that down. Bash me in the face for potentially 11. I've got a chump at this point. All right, BMC gets me a chumper and some mana and a card. And I get down my commander and produce even more. But notice the size of their commander. Their commander is so big that he could potentially exile 2 of my blockers And while it would shrink the commander, they could still do a lot of damage to me. Instead, they just exile my commander. Yuck. All right, BMC, do your thing. Play Liliana, kill away the Soul's Attendant. Pass for the turn. When it's got a Mind Twist. Mind Twists away more of my removal. Yuck. All right, I'm going to chump. Again. Getting quite low, but still going to pay 6. All right, Jitte down. We'll go in, kill the Dark Confidant, make us both discard, and Mind Twist the rest of my opponent's options out of their hand. So now they've got a 16/16 that I can just chump with those guys. All right, now I can't quite pay 6. I'm going to pay 3 and just get another changeling for safety. Eat their commander. My opponent kills a couple of my changelings, but at this point now I can start attacking their mana and Jitte, and I'm living on BMC. Down to 4, make another changeling. It's so funny, you look at the card and you think, oh yeah, card drawing is what I'm going to do with this. But a lot of times just pumping out 3 2s over and over is actually correct. And here, where I'm using them to keep my butt alive with Jitte, thank goodness that I have those cards, right? All right, so we're just going to, kill everything that my opponent plays is what it comes down to. And just continue to hammer away at my opponent's lands and resources. Opponent has D-Spark. Exiles my commander once more, down to just a changeling and 4 life, but I do have 3 Jitte tokens. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit of life here. Here I just make a treasure, equip, curse my opponent, remove their blocker, swing in. They have no cards in hand, so I can make this play fairly safely. And we're going to attack their mana some more. Pass. And we are getting control of this game. Go ahead and gain some life before I put the trigger on the stack in case I decide I want to do all 6. I decide just changeling is good enough for me. I'm going to attack their mana base again. And finally my opponent concedes. And I just living off black market connections and Jitte. That interaction is incredibly strong and makes it very hard / impossible for a creature deck to actually win if they cannot address those 2 cards. It makes it hard for a burn deck to win. It makes it hard for any even a control deck to win because it puts them on a clock and you also have mana and cards feeding you to go find the rest of the things you need, like more lands for your Dust Bowl against control. Thought that was a pretty cool game though. Got to see 2 of the cards that are it's not necessarily obvious why they're in the deck, right? Like, obviously they're good, but you think, but there's lots of good cards. Why are these the cards that you're selecting? All right, last game against this one, and I mean, look at this start. We'll just run through it at normal speed here, if it'll play. Yeah, it's just dumb. Is it gonna play? No. All right, we're gonna skip then. We'll skip ahead. So, Springleaf Drum, Mox Opal, use the drum, play the Dark Confidant with the mana floating. I'm going to place a land that comes in the blade tapped. I'm going to play a Talisman, sack, play a GPS, God Pharaoh statue, and my opponent concedes. Yeah, I think the game's probably over. You can play a 0-drop next turn, maybe, if you have one. Otherwise, nothing. And nothing against the Dark Confidant and 5, 6, 7 mana or whatever. Maybe had a Jitte active. Yeah, or actually, next turn we're going to play the commander. Just a little bit ridiculous, so good stuff. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed those games. You got to see 3 different losses. You got to see 3 different wins from being way behind, and you also got to see a handful of just completely, what this deck does in most of the games, which is just totally running the opponent over. And while I did give you, while I was able to provide a variety of game experiences with this deck, the reality is that 97 times out of 100, yes, you may have a back and forth game that you win. Yes, you may have, those come from behind games where your opponent just races ahead and unfortunately you contain them and get them back in the box. But there is a good portion that probably I would guess maybe half of the games, of the 100 games, probably half are just total blowouts. So it's really only about half the games that you're actually playing. And then of those half of the games, a small portion that you're actually struggling, and then of the small portion you're actually struggling, an even smaller portion that you actually lose. So hopefully you enjoyed watching this deck in action. There are opponents out there who may be watching who are inclined to show up and challenge me and make that record a lot worse. And it's very realistic that they can, just because the record's really good right now. It could be there's a lot of reasons why that could be. It could be that my opponents aren't prepared properly against this deck. Could be the selection of opponents I face. It could be that they, like a fan of the channel might have a much better insight in the weak points in the deck and be able to play a little bit better. For example, one of the losses was against 5-color bad stuff, and he's one of the older fans of the channel at this point in terms of how long he's been watching it. So as you can imagine, he does know where to apply the pressure. What I'm getting at is that although the record is exceptionally good, don't necessarily think that indicates that the record will always be that good, or that your record will be that good, or that my record will continue along those lines. What I do expect is that it can be that good. So the fact that the deck can perform at that level is what matters, because we have done it, so we know it can do it. And then if it doesn't do it all the time, that's okay. But knowing that you can have a 97% win rate is really good when you have a large sample size, like 100 games, which is a fairly large sample size for a Magic. And that just gives you sort of the high end of what the deck can do, right? As for the low, I don't think I've ever gone below a 50% win rate. It's typically above 50% win rate. Like, you typically win more than half of your games. And so, for any format, I think if you're playing in, say, 1v1 tournaments or something, there are some communities out there, or if you just like to play online and do the 1v1 games, this is definitely a deck I'd recommend for you. But that's all I've got for now. Hopefully you enjoyed watching. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.